This is a special edition of KSL News.
Good evening. I'm Mike Hedrick, joined by KSL Investigates colleagues Matt Gephardt, Daniela Rivera, and Courtney Johns.
Throughout 2024, our team investigated a number of issues across our state.
Yeah, from how artificial intelligence is shaping the world around us to unlicensed contractors walking away from unfinished jobs.
Yeah, we're going to start things off tonight, though, with a hard-fought fight for government transparency.
Well, KSL began that public records fight over 2 years ago when we sought access to Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes' work calendar. In November, it finally came to a close. Reyes' office agreed to hand over the calendar in a case with big impact. Here's how we got to this point, with a victory for both KSL and the public. It started with a routine records request in November 2022. The KSL investigators wanted to see Attorney General Sean Reyes' official work calendar. Even though other elected and public officials have shared copies of their calendars with KSL journalists, Reyes' office said no. So KSL producer Annie Knox took our request to Utah's State Records Committee, where members decided, according to Utah's public records law, the calendar should be released. But Reyes' efforts to keep you from seeing what he's been up to in office didn't end there. The AG's office took the KSL investigators to court to avoid releasing the calendar.
It's unfortunate that his office is fighting to keep the public from knowing this basic information.
Can I ask you a quick question about why you're fighting to keep your work calendar secret from the public? Sean, why are you
to keep a work calendar?
We caught up with Reyes in St. George in November 2023, a year after our initial request.
I can tell you, as far as calendars, those aren't records. They never have been. And I don't think they are currently.
In February 2024, a judge disagreed. He sided with the KSL investigators and the State Records Committee's interpretation of Utah law and ordered the release of the calendar. That day, we requested more of the calendar. But hours later, Utah lawmakers rushed to change the law, making all public and elected officials' calendars secret moving forward. A bill Utah Governor Spencer Cox signed the next day.
The AG's calendar was a public record when Ms. Knox made her request, and it remains a presumptively public record today.
Our new request landed us back in front of the State Records Committee in September, where members once again decided in favor of transparency.
The records should be released.
After fighting to keep the records from the public on the taxpayers' dime for nearly 2 years, Reyes' office settled the case in November and released more than 9,000 pages of calendar entries to the KSL investigators. But that victory is short-lived. KSL News Director Leona Wood called the move by Utah's legislature and governor to restrict the public's access to calendars going forward disappointing.
We want the public to benefit from the transparency that we fought for.
That was a lengthy court battle, and joining me now is KSL investigative producer Annie Knox, who has been fighting for transparency since the very beginning. Annie, you requested the calendars of a number of state officials. Why was this request such an ordeal?
The Attorney General's office was the only one to essentially tell us, yes, we have a calendar. No, we don't think you should get to see it. And we thought, no, the public should get to see this, so we fought for it.
And explain to us, why would a journalist request any public official's calendar?
Well, we know about the public appearances. We know what's in the press releases. What we don't know is how officials are spending the rest of their time. And this really gives us a more complete picture.
Annie Knox, you've done incredible work on this effort for transparency for Utahns. Thank you. We got to work looking through those calendar entries Annie fought for, and we found what's inside is interesting, but so is what's missing. At first glance, much of the more than 9,000 pages of calendar entries released to KSL appear to be routine, what you'd expect from the Utah Attorney General. Meetings with lawmakers and policy experts about issues Reyes made a priority, like fighting human trafficking and the opioid crisis. And yet, some entries we expected to receive we haven't found, like Reyes' 2020 speech at the Republican National Convention. We also noticed entries throughout that didn't just stay on Reyes' official calendar. They were also sent to or from a Gmail account, SeanReyesCalendar@gmail.com. Reyes isn't the first elected official to use a private account for public business, but it does raise questions about transparency and security. His office didn't respond to our questions tonight about the private email. As for Reyes' close friendship with Tim Ballard, the former leader of an anti-trafficking group accused of sexual misconduct, we only found 3 meetings between the two, all in 2019. And we should note Ballard has denied any wrongdoing.
Yeah, Reyes did not run again, and now incoming AG Derek Brown says he will make his calendar public, his promise of greater transparency that goes against the trend here in Utah.
That's right. As we've reported this year, the state's moving toward more government secrecy, much of it in response to journalists trying to get answers.
In 2021, the Salt Lake Tribune fought for copies of police statements after they used deadly force. Lawmakers made those records off limits the next year. Now, as the Deseret News fights in court to see how much money is flowing through public universities to athletes with sponsorship deals, lawmakers are advancing a bill to keep every part of those name, image, and likeness contracts secret. And coverage of how much water Utah golf courses are using to stay lush and green in one of the nation's driest states, followed by this bill, making sure you don't get to see that data.
It's a pattern of journalism policy.
The solution should not be to make that information not available to the public. It should be to fix what generated the criticism.
And we'll be keeping a close eye on any new measures limiting your right to information. Mike?
Yeah, so if a government office says no to a public records request here in Utah, they can appeal to the State Records Committee. As we've noted, KSL went before that committee multiple times in our effort to get access to the AG's calendar. They get a lot of appeals, and those public record disputes are starting to pile up.
We have had so many requests that we've been meeting twice monthly for the last little bit.
But that committee has not been able to meet for several months now because of 3 open seats. Marie Cornwall is one of 3 members of the governor's office renominated on July 22nd, but the Senate committee tasked with confirming them declined. The chairman telling KSL there was insufficient support for the appointments. New nominees were presented and Utah lawmakers questioned them last month. They must still be approved by the full Senate before the Records Committee can get back to work. All right, now to another issue that's impacting far too many families here in Utah. Is enough being done to shut down unlicensed contractors in our state? Our consumer investigator, Matt Gephardt, has been reporting on that all year long. Matt?
Punishment here in Utah often amounts to a slap on the wrist, even as homeowners are out huge sums of money.
Do you know how I can reach him?
On this day back in February of 2023, I was hunting for a fencing contractor. He had been paid, then he abandoned several jobs.
These are not installed correctly.
Last winter, I reported on a decking contractor who was paid and then abandoned several jobs.
So they were going to do all of this.
And just last night, I reported on a landscaper who was paid and then abandoned several jobs. Please stop me if you notice a pattern here. These are just 3 of the dozens of contractor issues on which Get Gephardt regularly hears complaints. And the similarities continue. In each of these 3 cases, the victim was told that a refund would be coming. Nope. They were told by the contractor that he had a contractor's license. False. And perhaps most striking, each contractor had been cited numerous times by state officials for their business practices before they were hired. Cited, but not shut down.
There appears to be a bit of a pattern here, no? Yeah, definitely.
Mark Steinigal runs Utah's professional licensing department, which has a lot less power to hold contractors accountable than you may think.
If they don't have a license, we can only issue a citation.
Now, make no mistake, contracting without a license is also a crime. Here in the Beehive State, it is a Class A misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of up to $1,000 for the first offense and $2,000 for additional offenses. In other states, Florida, California, Colorado, unlicensed contracting can be a felony for people who do it more than once, not in Utah. And getting Utah prosecutors to take these cases is not always easy, Steinigal says.
We would have a hard time convincing prosecutors who have to deal with such tough things like rapes and child abuse and serious murders, and to convince them with their limited resources to take a case like this.
That is something that Steinigal says is improving. In fact, in each of the 3 examples that I have cited here, the contractor has been criminally charged. Though in 2 of those cases, the contractor did not show up for court, and the one who did, the fencing contractor, he told the judge that he was broke.
It doesn't feel like justice.
This is a conversation we have often with individuals, is we will do everything we can to try to resolve it, because there are people who do wrong things, the money may be gone. And that is extremely frustrating.
Steinagel says he knows jilted homeowners are frustrated with the remedies, which are admittedly lousy. He says that is why it is crucial for folks to have those awkward conversations with a contractor before hiring them. Don't just ask for a license, verify it. While you're at it, demand references and call those references up. And always, always, always get a contract with clear expectations. You can also do the same public records request that I do when reporting on these stories. Ask the Utah Department of Commerce for any records of action they have taken against your contractor. If you see that he or she has been cited over and over again, walk away.
When you see someone do this multiple times over many months, they know that they have already taken money and used it inappropriately with multiple people, and yet they're still going to do it to your mother.
While operating without a license is not a felony here in Utah, other contractor crimes can rise to that level. For example, if enough money is taken, some prosecutors have levied theft by deception charges, a crime that could add up to jail time. Mike.
All right, thank you, Matt. Coming up here, artificial turf sounds like a win-win for a Salt Lake man, a way to save water and make it easier to enjoy his lawn.
It is absolutely fantastic for a handicapped person in a wheelchair.
Yeah, so why is the city making him get rid of it? Tonight, we investigate the red tape over green turf. Welcome back. Cell phones can be a lifeline for domestic violence survivors, but not if their phone plan is tied to their abuser. A new law is aimed at helping these women disconnect from danger.
Yeah, earlier this year, I looked into how that law works and how well phone companies are actually complying with that law.
Speak to an agent.
Just trying to talk to a human.
Representative.
Is enough to give anyone a migraine.
It feels like it's just so much.
But when Kristen Keener finally got through to a customer service representative, she says she had to fight for her phone number.
Everything is tied to my phone number. All of my accounts, everything is tied to my phone number.
It all started when her ex-husband removed her as an account holder and turned off her phone service.
I was really panicked.
Last June, Kristen went to T-Mobile's store in Taylorsville with a protective order which states her ex-husband must transfer her current wireless number to a separate account.
Like, I'm asking for your help here. Like, I need your help. And they were just like, sorry.
Her experience highlights an issue at the heart of the Safe Connections Act. Just a month after Kristen tried to get her number back, enforcement went into effect, which requires companies like T-Mobile help survivors like Kristen. Congresswoman Anna Eshoo sponsored that act.
It's made a huge difference in women's lives across the country.
Under the act, cell phone companies must make it easy for domestic abuse survivors to separate a cell phone line from an abuser's account, even allowing them to go to a different provider free of charge. To qualify, all they need is a legal document like a police report or court order or a signed affidavit from a professional. This includes therapists or victim services providers.
This is about getting this person away from someone who can track their movements through their cell phone plan.
Kimmy Wolf with Utah Domestic Violence Coalition says another crucial portion of this act states providers must do this within 2 business days.
This could be life and death.
Kristen tried again to get her account back in August, and initially she says that rep said no, but eventually sent her a link to an online form to migrate that account. But she was still having issues, so she contacted the KSL investigators, and we started looking into how well other providers were complying with that new law.
If someone has documentation and they're a survivor of domestic abuse,
KSL Investigates looked at 6 major providers: AT&T, Cricket Wireless, Mint Mobile, T-Mobile, Verizon, and Xfinity. We reviewed their websites, used their chat features, called customer service,
line separation,
as well as local branches. Only one company had the correct information on their website, and every staff member we spoke with who understood the rule: Xfinity. That being said, Congresswoman Eshoo says rollouts like these take time, and at last check, the FCC told her they had just 5 informal complaints.
Do you think that's because people are aware of it, or do you think maybe people just don't know to file a complaint?
I think that they do know. The consumer, the individuals know about this, and the providers are cooperating.
This is still happening. It's life or death, you say, and it's still happening.
It's incredibly frustrating because for so many survivors, the cell phone is their last bit of business that they need in order to handle in order to move on.
It did just feel like one more thing.
After finally receiving the form, Kristen says it took 7 more days to get her own separate T-Mobile account.
It makes you realize how vulnerable you are to not be able to access that.
We reached out to T-Mobile about Kristen's experience. In an email they wrote, this absolutely should not have been this customer's experience, and we're already looking closely at our processes to fix that. A statement Kristen hopes they live up to.
I really think that you've got some work to do.
Okay, so if you are having issues with your provider, you can and you really should report this to the FCC. So we do have a link on where you can file a complaint on our website. That's ksltv.com, along with step-by-step instructions on the fastest way to apply for that line separation for each of those providers.
That's an important story. Courtney, thank you very much. Now, for years, we have been hearing the steady drumbeat to conserve water, right? So Salt Lake City man thought that he was doing his part when he replaced his front lawn with water-saving artificial grass. But then the city told him it was not allowed and it had to go. KSL investigators looked into the red tape over green turf. For many of us, our yards are our sanctuaries, our own comfortable paradise of green space. We can unwind, relax, de-stress. At least that's how Tony Hughes sees his Salt Lake City yard.
I just want to be able to do what I want to do in my yard.
But getting around his comfortable green space was not always comfortable for Tony.
It's almost impossible in a wheelchair, especially after rain. It bogs down, it becomes mud, and then you can't go anywhere.
So this past summer, Tony paid a company to replace the grass in his front yard with artificial turf. Every blade of grass is manufactured.
It is absolutely fantastic for a handicapped person in a wheelchair.
Tony says he got to enjoy a synthetic sanctuary for about a week before a civil enforcement officer from the city showed up.
We paid $11,000 for the front yard, and now they're telling us we have to tear it up.
Yeah, tear it up and out of there. Turns out Salt Lake City banned artificial turf in the 90s. And the city council chose to keep that ban when they updated the landscaping ordinances in March. For Tony, not complying could add up fast. A fine of $25 every day. His fake turf stays in place.
You've got to get rid of it.
But hold on here. Salt Lake City has been locked in a mega drought since the early 2000s. In that time, Utah's population has shot up by over 1 million. That's a lot more people using a lot more water. More than 300 gallons of water per day for the average family, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. And roughly 30% of that goes to keeping lawns green. So why not allow an alternative that stays green without water?
Microplastics, chemicals, including PFAS.
Stephanie Doerr leads conservation efforts for Salt Lake's Public Utilities Department. She says turf typically includes toxic metals, carcinogens, and so-called forever chemicals that break down really, really slowly, if at all. They're great at making fake grass look lush, but bad for our health. Studies show if they end up in our water supply.
That flows off that landscape into the storm drain and moves into our stormwater system and goes into our waterways.
Still, natural grass isn't exactly pristine either. Many Utahns douse their lawns with toxic fertilizers and pesticides that can also make their way to waterways.
Many of the things that people do to treat their lawns are things that aren't necessary.
Another reason the city restricts turf is its surface temperature can run hot, like way hot. In fact, it's hot enough to raise air temperatures in the neighborhood.
60 to 80 degrees hotter than the ambient air temperature.
Yeah, when we tested the artificial turf at Liberty Park on a hot July day a few years back, we got readings of 175 degrees, 178, 185. That turf, by the way, was installed by Salt Lake City. So why don't they have the same qualms about turf installed in a park or athletic field as they do about turf in someone's yard?
I don't know if I have a specific answer for that.
What Michaela Oktay, deputy director of the city's planning division, can tell us is the turf restrictions only apply to areas of property that are required to have landscaping. So artificial turf in a front yard, park strip, or a corner side strip, well, that's bad. But in a backyard, there's no restriction because landscaping is not required. Wait a second. What?
I think there's definitely a balancing act with allowing it in other areas on someone's property that water can be retained in a better fashion than in a front yard.
Of Utah's 10 largest cities, only Provo joins Salt Lake in not allowing artificial turf where landscaping's required. Meanwhile, in Orem, Ogden, South Jordan, West Jordan, Sandy, you can put it there, but there's some restrictions in place. Then you've got Lehigh, West Valley City, and St. George, where you can put it anywhere on a residential lot. Nationally, the New York State Legislature is mulling over a moratorium on new turf, pending environmental and health studies. Colorado will soon ban it on most commercial, industrial, and state-owned property. And LA is considering a ban, as several other cities across the country have already enacted bans or severe restrictions. Back here in Salt Lake, there is one more reason they restrict artificial turf. It might make your neighbor jealous, or in other words, it creates a false expectation that a green lawn is attainable year-round.
I can't operate the lawnmower.
Tony says with the city pulling his turf out from underneath him, his choice is either soil, mulch, or rocks.
I have nothing against that, but I'm handicapped. I need to be able to move around on it, and this is perfect for a handicapped person.
City told us they are willing to let Tony apply for an ADA accommodation here. Fortunately for Tony, the company who installed his turf is willing to replace it with a surface acceptable to the city at no additional cost. And if you're a homeowner with artificial turf in Salt Lake City, you have until September of 2025 to replace it or face fines. All right, here we go. From elections to financial advice and spotting scams. Up next here, the KSL investigators put artificial intelligence to the test.
I've never even asked these questions of ChatGPT. These are kind of fun.
What do you think of that answer?
I think that's a really good answer.
That's kind of true, but kind of not true.
Reliable information leads to strong communities. That's why the KSL investigators never stop.
Exposing concerns.
Some paid to settle, others were dismissed.
Finding solutions.
We will link their story with this one.
Looking out for consumers.
Look how that's bent like that. I'm going to try Gephardt.
Checking the facts.
Going directly to the source.
Protecting you.
And empowering you.
Earning your trust.
The KSL investigators working for you. Welcome back. The AI revolution is reshaping the world all around us in ways that benefit us and ways that can trick us. Well, this year, the KSL investigators explored a variety of impacts, starting with the way that you can use artificial intelligence to flip the script on would-be scammers. Matt?
Yeah, Mike, when it comes to online scams, some are pretty obvious, right? No, you didn't win the lottery. No, that famous movie star is not trying to date you. Others are much more sophisticated. So could AI give us a leg up? Let's see.
It's now pretty easy for a scammer to make convincing calls or send convincing messages. Could that really be your bank, your family member, your boss? But if the bad guys can use AI against us, can we use it to fight back?
I've never even asked these questions of ChatGPT. These are kind of fun.
I took that question to Nexus IT Consultants, where owner Earl Foote agreed to help me test one popular AI program.
Let's ask ChatGPT.
We gave it a series of questions that would certainly raise a red flag with this expert.
I just got a text message saying I've got a package, but they can't deliver it.
The common, we can't deliver your package scam.
A gentleman from Microsoft.
The common, you can trust me, I'm tech support scam. The maybe less common, hey, it's your buddy and KSL producer Sloan Schrag, and he's lost his shirt on the slot machines scam.
And saying, hey, Matt, you know, I got stranded in Wendover.
With each, ChatGPT correctly warned this is almost certainly a con.
It's important to verify the situation before sending any money.
And it also offered lots of steps to verify it and report it. This IT consultant is impressed.
What do you think of that answer?
I think that's a really good answer.
All right, let's try something a little less black and white. Ransomware has become an AI-assisted hacker favorite, so we asked ChatGPT.
Let's just say, like, my computer is locked, and they say I have to send Bitcoin to unlock it.
Okay.
What should I do?
I like the ambiguity, too.
The bot's advice?
Do not pay the ransom.
What do you think about that?
That is absolutely what the FBI recommends.
The FBI says don't pay the ransom.
Yep.
But this also demonstrates one place where AI can fall short. There really isn't a dialogue.
But if I call you and say, Earl, I'm desperate, I got to have this file.
Yep.
What do you say to me?
So we'll assess it with you again, and the way we would approach it is, what is the data worth to you?
ChatGPT did suggest that I reach out to a professional, but that suggestion was way down on the list. Earl says that would be his first immediate advice.
We do have some tools, particularly for the most well-known ransomwares. We're able to decrypt those encrypted files sometimes without you paying a ransom, right?
In the end, though, Earl thinks that ChatGPT proved a handy tool that we can use to at least point us in the right direction when we engage with a potential scammer. Courtney?
All right, thank you, Matt. So just how useful is AI to search for information? Well, the KSL investigators put several AI bots to the test this year to find out.
Think about it. What once took you hours, AI can do in seconds. Whether it's helping you reword that email to your boss, digging up a gardening guide, or dishing out a dinner idea, AI is a source of endless information. But what about its capacity for misinformation? And can we trust it with more important things like helping us participate in democracy and vote in this year's elections?
This one could be fun.
Inside Davis County's Election Center, we figured County Clerk Brian McKenzie would be the perfect person to help us put 5 different AI bots to the test. ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, Google's Gemini, Meta's AI, and Snapchat's My AI.
First, a basic question.
And we're using some of the most common Utah voter questions, like, when is the next election in Utah? ChatGPT told us.
On November 5th, 2024.
Which Brian rates.
That's kind of true, but kind of not true.
Google's Gemini told us.
I'm still learning how to answer this question. In the meantime, try Google search.
To Google it.
Looks like this AI is still rather young, and learning a lot of things may not be a great resource to find out election information.
Anthropic's Claude. It's thinking. Just kept giving us this error message.
I would rather no answer than wrong answer.
But that's exactly what we got from Snapchat's My AI.
This one is not giving us accurate information.
It said Utah's next general election is November 3rd, which is just wrong.
It's early, which is better than late, but it is inaccurate.
Meta's AI was the only one that gave us a date in June.
This is wonderful. So this is the first one that popped up and gave us a heads up that there's a primary election.
Time to try a more difficult question. Here's ChatGPT again.
Can I show up and vote if I'm not registered to vote yet?
Let's see what it tells us. If you're not registered to vote and show up at a polling place on election day, you will not be able to vote.
Is that true?
That is not true.
Not true, Brian says, because even if you're not registered to vote in Utah, you're not out of luck. You can show up, register, and cast a vote on election day.
No. In order to vote in Utah, you must be registered to vote.
Snapchat's AI got it wrong, too.
The average citizen may look at this and be like, well, I'm not registered, I'm out of luck.
But it wasn't all misinformation. For example, Brian was impressed with what ChatGPT knew about Utah's vote-by-mail process.
But I love that it pointed out that you can track your ballot. If you choose to vote by mail, that's a really cool feature.
For the final test, we let the elections expert take on AI himself.
Can Utah's voting machines be hacked?
Ooh.
I might regret asking that question.
The answer from ChatGPT, it's a long one.
Like any technology, voting machines are susceptible to potential security vulnerabilities, including hacking. However, efforts are made to implement security measures to mitigate these risks and ensure the integrity of the voting process.
How do you feel about that answer?
Do you know what? If I was to prepare some sort of a statement on election security, I would probably have something very similar to that.
While ChatGPT seemed to be the most advanced of the AI bots we tried, none of them answered our questions with 100% accuracy. And that, Brian says, is the takeaway.
We can't put 100% confidence in these new technologies as they're still learning and as we're learning how to interact with them.
Anytime we turn to AI for information, it's worth taking a moment to think about it. And when it comes to elections, it's also worth taking a moment to fact check. During 2024, we used the KSL Truth Test lens to fact check a variety of claims made by candidates and elected officials during debates and public forums.
All right, great stories there, Daniela. Thank you. It is a habit many drivers probably don't even think about. We're talking about idling.
I was
quite astonished. I was like, oh gosh, all right, I'm going to live in this.
When you should shut that engine off and the effects it has if you do not. That story coming up next. Welcome back. One of our first stories this year examined Utah's family court system. We wanted to see how judges weigh evidence of abuse by one parent against claims of alienation by another one. And several mothers told Daniela Rivera that they reported abuse only to face losing custody of their kids.
What in my mind were very valid reasons that a child would not want to be in a particular situation has been turned around to be that I'm somehow the issue.
Parents who spoke with us also pushed lawmakers for change.
House Bill 198.
Parent,
we've been court ordered into escalating abuse.
After parent.
The court system has failed to protect my children.
And even teenagers.
My brother's still in the unsafe living situation.
Spoke in favor of a reform bill aimed at Utah's family court system. In March, lawmakers passed the bill prioritizing kids' safety in custody decisions. It's known as Ohm's Law, named for the 16-year-old boy killed by his father last year.
I'm just so happy we moved the needle. Like, it's really moved, and it's moving in the direction of kids.
All right, Danielle, thank you. And we finally have new information in the death of a canine officer.
Yeah, after months of pushing for answers, the Utah Department of Corrections agreed to discuss the case with the KSL investigators, admitting that the death could have been avoided.
July 13th, 2023.
The handler is devastated at what happened, and he's working through those emotions and that difficulty.
Temperatures were in the high 90s when Loki was found dead inside his handler's truck near the kennels at the Utah State Prison. Several state agencies have denied our request for investigatory records, stating the district attorney was still investigating.
We've received very little information on what happened to this dog, but I think it's pretty clear what happened. Is it safe to say that this death could have been avoided?
Absolutely. No question about that.
Citing the ongoing investigation during our interview last fall, Director of Communications and Government Relations for the Utah Department of Corrections, Glenn Mills, would not provide specifics on what happened that day or if the officer, who is still working for the Corrections Department, was ever disciplined.
But what I will say is that the officer has not been involved in handling a canine since the incident.
Will the officer ever be allowed to have a canine?
At this point, there is no plan for that.
Why?
This is an ongoing situation.
A situation that amounted to an officer going on paid leave for almost 4 months, translating to just under $21,000.
Has UDC done an assessment overall on how much this incident cost taxpayers?
That's something that we have to take very seriously. And that's something that is considered when we talk about potential discipline in this case. So that definitely is a factor for sure.
According to the department, Loki, as well as his replacement Max, cost nearly $20,000. That, combined with the officer's paid leave, adds up to just over $40,000. That doesn't include the time the department spent training a new canine, an 8-week course plus annual recertification, or the cost of the investigation, which was done by the State Bureau of Investigation, an estimate we are still waiting to hear back on.
Cost aside, the tragedy here is the loss of a canine officer. We rely on our canine officers to complete our mission here in the Department of Corrections, and they play a key role in that. That's the most devastating element to all of this.
On December 13th, the district attorney announced that he would not be pressing charges. Now, the investigation pointed to systemic failures within the Department of Corrections, including inadequate training on the vehicle's heat alert system, which in this case was turned off. As for that officer, an internal disciplinary committee is still weighing on that decision.
Courtney, great job on that. Thank you. We've already seen some winter inversions settle in this month, right? So raise your hand if you idle your car. We all do it, right? And in many cases, we do not have a choice, but sometimes we do. And you're about to see a few little adjustments that can make some big changes in the air that we breathe. Okay, so you see this, right? We've all experienced it. It's a crazy cold morning before work, and in order to keep the ice on the outside, now you start blasting the heat on the inside, warming things up 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe even more. Zero movement, a lot of exhaust.
I was quite astonished. I was like, oh gosh, all right, I'm going to live in this.
That's Grayson Wickel with Utah Clean Cities, a nonprofit focused on reducing vehicle emissions. And when he moved here about a year ago, never did he imagine
what it tastes like.
The air in this valley would have a flavor.
So yeah, like a sweet and sour blend.
Barf emoji, right? Experts say one of the easiest ways to get rid of that bad taste in your mouth is reduce the idling. So, let me throw some numbers at you here. U.S. Department of Energy says idling wastes about 3 billion gallons of fuel, and it generates around 30 million tons of CO2 every year in the United States. I know. It's hard to wrap your head around those kinds of numbers. So consider this. Idling more than 10 seconds uses more fuel and it produces more emissions than stopping and restarting the engine. 10 seconds. And if you're anything like me,
we're idling, you know.
I am?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. All right. Let's turn it off. Oh, man. What hypocrites.
Yeah, it's a tough habit to break. So, with that in mind, we checked out a few spots. Environmental groups say
a minute 20.
Folks can make the biggest impact. And ordering at the drive-thru.
It's got a few double-decker tacos.
In the middle of lunch hour.
Got a couple more that are coming in here.
Is one of those spots that we can shut down the engine.
Got all these cars that are idling at the same time for really minutes.
Remember the 10-second rule.
141. That's a long time.
We're at 244 right now.
Even when the line is at drive-through speeds, it can be done.
So they just rolled in to pay for their food at just under 3 minutes.
The other big idle zones are directly in front of schools.
Coming up on 4 minutes here. Now this car right here, it is idling.
Parents often show up early, and while this guy's the gold standard,
sounds like your car is off, is that right?
That's right.
You're not idling.
In most cars, the key never turned, and the time continued to climb.
A lot of these cars are still idling.
Now, of course, there's one place you should never go idle-free, and that is in the middle of traffic. So, the Utah Department of Transportation is using technology to keep the amount of idling to a minimum.
Well, if you improve the flow and the vehicles aren't stopping, they're not emitting as much, right?
And keeping that traffic flow is exactly what UDOT engineers are trying to do in this control center. Looking at data on the daily, watching for patterns, and keeping the bulk of vehicles moving.
What percentage of cars are arriving when it's green versus what percentage of cars are arriving when it's red? And we can tweak those timings in the signals to improve that flow down the corridor.
In place right now are dozens of these panels using CAV, or Connective Autonomous Vehicle Technology. The tag is in a handful of buses and snowplows, alerting traffic signals when they are approaching and keeping that light green just a little bit longer if they need to make up some time or keep the shovels moving. These maps show the main corridors where it's being used so far, and the hope is in the future, this technology will be in just about every vehicle on the road. Kind of similar to Google's Green Light Initiative, where they are testing the use of artificial intelligence in big cities to optimize the movement in a line of intersections and create a wave of green lights, improving the flow of traffic and reducing stop-and-go emissions. And while that's the big picture approach to cut back on idling, it's the little picture adjustments you can make.
Let's turn it off.
I can certainly make.
612, 613.
And just about all of us can make to keep the air just a little bit cleaner.
So regardless of the temperature outside, on a cold start, experts encourage us to let the car idle for no more than 30 seconds before hitting the road. We'll be right back with a roundup of some of the best of Get Gephardt. Finally, tonight, we want to take a moment to thank the many Utahns who trusted the KSL investigators to share their stories this year.
And we want to highlight the impact your voices have had. Survivor Cammie Johnson sat down with us in January after learning her perpetrator had been granted a parole date, but she was never notified of his parole hearing. It's a similar story with Brenda Black. She and her daughter not notified of multiple parole hearings. Utah's parole board then promised to do better. Just this month, the board invited survivors and advocates to weigh in on changes to how they communicate with survivors of crime, including a new victim-centered notification system.
And when Jason Maldonado's son, Kian, was killed this August, his world crumbled.
Police say his son was stabbed by a former classmate during a fight, making Kian one of 5 teens who have been killed by other teens within a matter of months in Salt Lake County. Now, Jason's strength in sharing his son's story has helped us take a deeper look at this complicated problem, and he himself has become an advocate pushing for safer schools. Now, Kian's school has announced they are increasing security and reviewing their discipline practices.
Also, Utah Family says companies should protect employees and their family members from toxins at work. Speaking out for the very first time, Larry Boynton telling us that his family did not get that protection. The result, he says, his wife Barbara died of cancer in 2016, decades after shaking asbestos out of his work clothes. Larry sued the companies that he worked for long ago. He sat down with KSL to call attention to job hazards that come home.
And some of the most meaningful work that we do in Get Gephardt is not necessarily always the flashiest. It's somebody who's just at their wits' end trying to get a company to live up to its obligations. Here are a few examples from the past year where Get Gephardt was able to get things done for you.
It's every single package.
In January, Travis Stewart decided to get Gephardt after discovering every single package FedEx sent him was being delivered to an apartment building several blocks away. Travis had tried on his own to get FedEx to fix their mapping mistake. That did not work, but it did after we called their PR department.
I've spent $7,500 on this thing, and it doesn't work or operate.
In February, we got the call from Brian Jorgensen, whose golf cart stopped working shortly after he bought it. We called the Texas manufacturer, who sent him a new engine.
There's our castle.
In March, we were able to help Dennis Hawkins, who could not get reimbursement on a rental car insurance policy.
I was frustrated in not being able to get satisfaction.
If it got fixed, it'd be, a great vehicle to still have.
In April, our team helped persuade a car warranty company to come to a resolution on repairs for Scott Dumas's ride after he had been rebuffed asking on his own. We helped several other Utahns with denied car warranty issues this year also.
I didn't know where else to go, and I just wanted to contact you to see what you could do.
In May, we were able to help James Oborn, who was towed even though the no parking signs were pretty unclear. We took this investigation all the way to state regulators who agreed, and James ultimately got a refund.
There's this chunk of paint taken out and this whole dent right here.
In June, we were able to help 2 different drivers whose cars were slammed into one another inside of an automatic car wash. The car wash owners had told them they were on their own for repairs, but in the end, decided to cover those repair costs.
There's no bigger frustration as a patient.
In July, Jordan Lee was frustrated because he was being billed for somebody else's medical scans. Trying to convince the hospital on his own did not work, but it worked when we called on his behalf.
Was there anyone who's ever said, you don't qualify for this?
No.
In August, we helped convince the Social Security Administration to take another look at why death benefits had been cut off to a Utah teenager who, according to federal law, qualifies since his dad died. That young man has since been paid everything he was due. In September, an interesting one. Robert Brown's air conditioner unit went out, and when he contacted his home warranty company, he was told he'd be paid $3,000. But then the company tried to walk back that offer, saying it was made by their chat bot.
I just don't know where to go from this, so that's where I decided, you know what, let's call Matt.
We contacted state regulators who said that if you get an offer from a company's AI, the company needs to honor it, and ultimately, Robert got his check.
How long has this been going on?
Ooh, 4 or 5 months, maybe.
In October, I was able to help Matt Lewandowski get back into his LinkedIn social media account after he'd been locked out, and the company would not help.
I don't understand how it's cheaper for them to keep replacing control panels at this point.
In November, we helped convince GE to finally replace Andy Atuafi's dishwasher rather than just trying to fix it over and over and over again. Hopefully, it is the end of hand washing for this busy Utah mom. And this month, we helped Aubrey Dyson finally get the Christmas gift she'd been waiting for. The blender that her grandma got her last year was recalled, and the company kept not sending a replacement until Get Gephardt got involved.
And if you have an issue you would like us to investigate, please reach out. Call or text the number on your screen right there, 385-707-6153, or you can email investigates@ksl.com. Our team right here, fantastic work. Let's do it again in 2025. How's that sound?
Absolutely. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Happy New Year, everyone. Now we have...
Wait.